Today's talk is titled, I'm a Meme, the Buddha never said that. To be delivered by Rev Kerry Kiyohara. Kerry Kiyohara is a resident minister of Makawao Buddhist Temple on Maui, serving Hanapa Hanwanji Mission of Hawaii. And I'm sure I'm not pronouncing these well. Kerry was Takudo ordained in 2016 and graduated from Chaobuko Kaikuen Seminary in Kyoto in 2018, receiving Kyoshi certification as teacher in the Jodo Shinsu Hongwanji tradition. This is for you to say. Kerry previously worked as a corporate executive, consultant, and writer in Los Angeles, Tokyo, Beijing, Shanghai, and Honolulu. Kerry graduated with BA and MBA degrees from the University of Southern California. Kerry speaks American English natively, fluent professional Japanese, basic Spanish, survival Chinese, but struggles daily with Hawaiian Creole English. Dakan Pidgin Ya. Dakan Pidgin Ya. Kerry is married to Mimi, and they are delighted to be delighted to be grandparents of an 11-year-old granddaughter, and a 4-year-old grandson. Reverend Kerry.
Well, thank you very much, Dolores. You speak Dakan, Japanese. It's actually, don't worry, Honganji is very hard to pronounce. So let me do a quick audio check. Everyone can hear okay? Very good. Let me pull up my script real quick. So good morning. Aloha kakahiaka. Aloha kako. Aloha for everyone. Good morning. I'm delighted to be invited back as a guest speaker today at UUCC. I'm very grateful for the principle of a free and responsible search for truth and meaning because it enables the sharing of wisdom and tradition today. And how rare and wonderful are the causes and conditions that allow us to be able to share this moment on this day of an unrepeatable life. First, a comment about the altar setup. Let me see if I can see where I am. To my left, I guess it's on your right, you can see there's essentially it's called the Hanamido. It's a flower palace. It is adorned with tropical flowers, local flowers. I think you can sort of see there's a little statue of the baby Buddha, and then there's these little ladles that we use to bathe the baby Buddha. So today, Hanamatsuri, the flower festival, marks the birth of the historical Buddha, Gautama Siddhartha, whose teachings are known as Buddhism. So it's kind of a big deal service. You can see, I don't know if you can see all the details this side. There's altar cloths that are placed. Oops, it's really hard to do this backwards. Altar cloths placed on the altar tables, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have a chance to visit us in April, this would be a good time to do it because the altar's all dressed up. So thank you again for inviting me. And today, I'd like to explore some of the nuances of Buddhism through the things that the Buddha never said. Let me pull up, let's see, go to share slides or share screen. There we go, this one. Okay, hopefully you can see the slides okay. It's not really that important, but it helps to see the visual a little bit. So let's see, this next, yeah, okay. So I'm a meme, the Buddha never said that. Let's start with this one. So example, raise your hand if you've heard this somewhere along the line as the primary teaching of Buddhism. Right? So life is suffering, the Buddha. Now, of course, the whole point is the Buddha never actually said that in those precise words. I mean, if you think about it, right, the Buddha never said that in those exact words. Why? Well, obviously, the historical Buddha didn't speak English. In fact, the words of the Buddha were not written down for 100 years after the Buddha's death. because there was no technology to do that. They didn't have papers and pencils and that kind of stuff. The technology that did exist, it wouldn't last more than a couple years. So that's why the chanting of sutra, and sutra refers to the words of the Buddha, the chanting of the sutra, so the disciples of the Buddha transmitted the teachings that they had heard. They'd memorize the words and recite them together, so that if I forget one part, my friend next to me remembers it. So together, we remember all the words of the Buddha. So after 100 years, they actually start writing them down. And this is where the tradition of chanting the sutras come from. Later on, it develops into one of the merit-building practices or virtuous practices in Buddhism, because to memorize the words, you have to understand the words. And thus, chanting is a combination of studying the words and internalizing the meaning. What the Buddha did actually teach was this one. Let's see if I got the right slide. Yeah. All things arising from causes and conditions are dukkha. So obviously we need to understand a couple of ideas here. First, beginning with the idea of dukkha. So what the Buddha actually said is this: birth is stressful, aging is stressful, death is stressful, sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, and despair are stressful. Associated with the unbeloved is stressful. Separation from the loved is stressful. Not getting what is wanted is stressful. In short, the 5 clinging aggregates are stressful. These are the words of Gautama Buddha in the Samyutta Nikaya, which is part of the Pali Canon, the group discourses of the Buddha. This is verse 56.11. Now you can see why life is suffering is much easier to understand. You can see that dukkha is translated as stressful, right? But it also has the nuances of dissatisfaction, discontent, disappointment, pain, yes, and suffering. So dukkha includes birth, aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, distress, despair, association with the unbeloved, being with something that you don't love, being separated from what you love, right? And not getting what you want. So in short, these are called the 5 clinging aggregates, the skandhas in Sanskrit. So beginning with form. So our human senses, we got 5 sense organs. We see form, we touch form, right? We get this material image or impression. And then we have sensations or feelings, from this form. Then we have perception, we start perceiving things. Then there's mental activity or formation. We start conceptualizing what it is, this data that's coming into our senses. And then there's consciousness, the idea that we are aware of who we are, awareness of self. So in the Theravada tradition, which is what most people are familiar with, the monks with the shaved heads and the robes, suffering arises when one identifies with or clings to these aggregates. And this suffering is extinguished by relinquishing attachment to these aggregates. So again, attachment to form, sensation or feelings, perceptions, mental activity, and consciousness, the sense of self. The Mahayana tradition, of which Pure Land Buddhism and Jodo Shinshu is a part, asserts that the nature of all aggregates is intrinsically empty of independent existence. You may have heard the expression, it's empty in kind of the Chinese philosophical sense. So again, dukkha has many nuances: dissatisfaction, discontent, disappointment, pain, disconnection, depression, anxiety, addiction. These are all forms of suffering. Well, think of it this way, right? Because we're the product of a mother and father, and they're a product of their mothers and fathers, we, as human beings, arise from causes and conditions, by definition. And thus the Buddha taught that human life, which I put into quotes, is characterized by the truth of human existence: birth, aging, death, decay. You're born human. Your body and mind age. They're constantly changing, constantly changing. Your body and mind eventually decay. You get illness, disease, different parts of your body start failing. You inevitably reach the end of life. There are no exceptions to this truth of human existence. There are no exceptions to this truth of impermanence. But the selective interpretation, life is suffering, is the origin of the common misperception that Buddhism is pessimistic, which is not the case. It's a very realistic view of the human condition, human existence, and indeed, Buddhism seeks to explain why people suffer, but also why people are not happy, or feel disappointed or discontent, unfulfilled, or experience stress, right, which manifests in modern ailments that we call anxiety, depression, and addiction. So in fact, Buddhism is positive and affirming. The Mahayana stream of Buddhism asserts that Buddha nature, the potential to become Buddha, exists in all people, in all forms of life. Right? So everyone could become a Buddha. Anyone can become a Buddha, regardless of intellectual ability, physical ability, wealth, power, influence, age, position. None of this has anything to do with it. Every person, every form of life has the potential inside to become Buddha. So did you know that Buddhism was the first major religion to allow women on the path leading to enlightenment? During the Buddhist time, 2,600 years ago, females, women, were considered defiled and impure, and thus incapable of realizing awakening. So the Buddha taught, the Buddha never said life is suffering, but did teach the nuance, right? Life comes with suffering. Life comes with suffering because we're human. So imagine if the poster said life is stressful. Right? I think we all agree with it, but it's not very impactful. So the Buddha taught that attachment, the clinging to these things that arise from causes and conditions, is dukkha. It's not satisfying. You're not going to be satisfied. It's going to be disappointing. It doesn't lead to happiness or contentment. And thus, it causes stress in human life. Think of it this way. The truth of impermanence. If you cling to an image of yourself as young, right, the inevitability of the aging of body and mind, it's stressful. It's dukkha. Right? The truth of non-self. If you cling to the idea that you're the exception, that you're special, that this unrepeatable life, it's about me, right? If you delude yourself into believing you're not going to get old, you're never going to die, and then aging and end of life, which is inevitable, it's likely to be very, very stressful. It's going to be dukkha. If you're stubbornly attached to who you are, or what you own, or the things you've accomplished, right? The truth of constant change, the truth of impermanence, is going to create stress in your life. So from the Buddhist perspective, attachment to the past, I think in modern terms we call it living in the past, right? This is dukkha, right? Because our ego self gets stuck in this loop, right? I should have, if only I had said this, right? And this endless loop of trying to fix the unchangeable past, right? This is what leads to depression. You're stuck in the past. Conversely, fear of the unknown future. What if there's another pandemic? What if? This leads to anxiety because the human mind, as wonderful as it is, cannot predict the future. In the Buddhist cosmology, there are 6 realms of existence. There are gods and demons, spirits, animals, and humans. The 6 realms of existence are another lecture all of its own. But the human realm, let's focus on that. The human realm is called samsara in Sanskrit, which can be translated as the realm of confusion and delusion. Right? Confusion, because reality as it is, the world doesn't actually revolve around me. It doesn't revolve around my ego. It doesn't revolve around Kerry. Right? Delusion, because my human ego self, me, existed. I insist, I'm the exception. I'm special. So it's not going to happen to me. So when I'm faced with the truth of impermanence, this constant change, including me, right, it's very stressful. It's dukkha. It can lead to suffering. And if you think about it, confusion and delusion pretty much describe what we see when we turn on the news or open a newspaper. I'm sorry, I missed this slide, but this is the long version of Life is Stressful. Here's a good one. So how about this Buddhism, right? Not Buddhism, the religion, but Buddhism, in the sense the words are something the Buddha might have said, sort of, kind of said. So this is actually quite nice. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. The Buddha. Never said that. If you actually do the search on this, this quote actually comes from Haruki Murakami, who's the Japanese writer. And he was talking about what the Buddha taught. And he was talking about how Buddhism influenced his ideas. And then it's quoted as pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. So our human tendency to attachment to things that arise from causes and conditions, it leads to dukkha, right? Suffering. Because we can never satisfy our egocentric cravings, our self-centered desires and blind passions. This thirst is insatiable. So nirvana, becoming Buddha, is the extinguishing, the blowing out of the flames of these self-centered cravings, egotistical desires, and blind passions. Let's take a moment to think about that, right? What arises from causes and conditions? Human life, right? Human beings are born to mother and father who had mother and fathers and mothers and fathers. So one of the poems talked about, if you go back 20 generations, there's 1 million people that all came together over time, 20 generations, that comes to me. Yeah, you're supposed to laugh there. It's supposed to be the cute face. So. It comes down to me. How the preschool students like it when I do that. So anyway, but think about that, right? There's 1 million people before you get to Kerry. Right? What I do, 1 million people later, is going to affect somebody else. Somebody else. We talk about, in Asian culture, we talk about our honored ancestors. What we think, say, and do right now will determine whether we are an honored ancestor or not. So your legacy is being created today. Being a good ancestor begins today. So there's no truth, there's no exceptions to the truth of impermanence. If you're born human, right, you are going to age, your body's going to wear out, and eventually you reach the end of life. But me, my ego self, I don't like that. I don't like that idea. And that's why people spend billions of dollars every year on products to make us look young or not old, right? Or spend money on cosmetic surgeries. What's it, Botox, the stuff that freezes your muscles, right? So you don't have any wrinkles. If you have way too much money, you're spending it on life-extending technologies, which sounds kind of cool. But it goes back to the idea of, hey, let's all drink some blood of the virgins. Anybody want to join me? And again, we spend so much money, right, to deny the reality as it is of being human, of being born human. So we know in our hearts, and we understand intellectually the truth of human existence. Born human, our bodies and minds are going to age, decay, end in death, and yet we continue to deny it. So it is this attachment or clinging to this idea of, for example, forever 21, right? And this is what's going to cause suffering in the form of depression, anxiety, stress, and unhappiness. As an ex-advertising copywriter, I thought Forever 21 was the most brilliant brand promise of a fashion line that I've ever seen. It's retail stores. If you shop there, right? So if you wear trendy fashions, you style your hair using a new improved version of the shampoo, conditioner, and gel, use Botox, get plastic surgeries, work out twice a day, drink 2 gallons of water a day, eat right or don't eat at all, intermittently fast, jump into a pool of cold water, sound bathing, or whatever you want to do. We do all these things in pursuit of Forever 21. And yet, intellectually, we know that's not possible. So we do all these things, we spend all this money, this time and energy, and then you die. The American dream is dukkha. The American dream is also not satisfying because it's about achieving success, wealth, and happiness. But success, wealth, and happiness all arise from causes and conditions. And thus, success, however you define it, is impermanent, insubstantial. It's ultimately not going to be satisfying. So having achieved that promotion or the title, I spent a good chunk of my life earning the title CEO. But I still wanted more. I was lucky. I realized that's not actually what I wanted to be in life. But you become programmed. If you take an MBA course, you are programmed to become CEO. And you just pursue that because that's what you're supposed to do. Having made $1 bazillion, which I don't have, by the way, we still want more. If you have lots of money, you got plenty of money, you still want more. We like to think our success is due to me, right? My intelligence, my hard work, my brilliance, when in fact, we wouldn't be a success without teachers who gave us knowledge and skills, without parents who gave us a moral compass, bosses who taught us, the way to really get things done, and colleagues who supported us, even if we weren't, particularly nice to them. So the Buddhist insight is simply this: this unrepeatable life is not about me. It is the truth of non-self. And then, right, you reach a certain stage in life, and you enter retirement, and you lose that title, that position, that salary, all the trappings of success, the big office or whatever. Suddenly, we're not the big boss, right? We're simply retired. Retired, thus irrelevant, right? Or worse, we're old and thus useless. By the way, I don't believe that. Or perhaps you've planned and executed the strategy to be financially secured in retirement, and you're actually enjoying your golden years. And then you die. How about wealth? The American dream is really about having more money than the other guy and ensuring that he, she, they know that I have more money than he, she, or they. Right? So having achieved or received wealth, do you want more or less? We want more, 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 more. So we spend time and energy chasing the dreams of getting even richer. Or we can spend time and energy worrying about, will you run out of money in retirement? Can you afford the cost of long-term care? I'm 63, so the online advertising that I see, it's all this messaging. Aren't you going to run out of money in retirement? If you have this portfolio, you should call us. We'll tell you how to not run out of money. So introducing this idea that I might run out of money. Or if you just follow the news, right, we worry about getting scammed or cheated or someone stealing our money or paying too much in taxes or something. And then you die. Or how about happiness? Happiness. Do you know anybody who's constantly happy? Totally content with life, just as it is, wanting nothing more. No more wishing. There's nothing missing. Happiness, obviously, arises from causes and conditions, thus it's impermanent, it lacks substance, it's empty, and ultimately fades away. Because happiness is a feeling and an emotion, right, arising from causes and conditions. If we cling to that feeling, I want to be happy all the time, it's not possible, and thus the periods of unhappiness create stress, create suffering. Happiness in itself is transient and fleeting. And then you die. So seen from this perspective, we begin to understand why the American dream is actually empty. The American dream is empty and devoid of substance. The American dream is dukkha. Okay. And then there are the Buddha-isms, which are actually based on Buddhist insights and ideas, but not a direct quote of the Buddha. And for profit in modern times, social media websites produce endless posters of Buddha-isms, little tidbits of wisdom based on Buddhism, but they tweak it to make it more pithy in English, to make it sound better. And then they attribute the quote to the Buddha with an image of the Buddha to give it authority. The Buddha said this, so you should believe this. So this one is actually quite brilliant, right? The trouble is, you think you have time. The Buddha never actually said it in those words, but this is one of the things you can take away from the teachings of the Buddha. So one of today's readings addressed this illusion of time, because we define it in a linguistic sense. We mistake it for real time. So it's actually quite profound. It's an important reminder of the fleeting nature of this unrepeatable life. But the Buddha never actually said it in those words. So this is another one. There's a whole category which comes from the book, The Teachings of the Buddha, which is an orange-covered book. You've probably seen it in a hotel room somewhere. It's sort of like the Gideon Bible. There's a nonprofit organization that distributes these for free. So I can actually help you get copies if you'd like to get copies of the Teachings of the Buddha. So the writings are based on Buddhism. They're often quite poetic, profound expression of Buddhist ideas, but not a direct quote from the Buddha. And so again, the profit motive in social media emerges. You got websites, you got influencers taking the words, attributing them to the Buddha, not to the original source. So thousands of candles can be lit from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases from being shared. And then you do things like this, right? 1,000 candles can be lit from one candle. However, the life of the original candle is not shortened in the least. The Dalai Lama, the 14th Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama never said that. 1,000 candles can be lighted from the flame of one candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness can be spread without diminishing that of yourself. Mahatma Gandhi never said that. So all of these posters are actually from the same website. Okay, here's another one. Sorry, this one. This one. Okay, so again, this comes from the teachings of the Buddha. It's an interpretation of the teachings. Everything changes, nothing remains without change. The full quotation is this. Oops, sorry. It is the everlasting and unchanging rule of this world that everything is created by a series of causes and conditions, and everything disappears by the same rule. Everything changes, nothing remains without change. And then finally, there's the category of funny and offensive at the same time. Let that stuff go. There's a 4-letter word underneath there, but it didn't seem appropriate. So let that stuff go. The Buddha never said that. Although it's actually not a bad description of one of the approaches to letting go of attachments. Just let it go. Just let it go. Very hard to do because our ego is attached to that, but different discussion. So the juxtaposition of the vernacular, right, stuff, and the wisdom of the Buddha is ironic and thus amusing. Hey, I'm from Los Angeles. I'm born and raised in LA. I can appreciate the humor. On the other hand, this product is actually a doormat. Right? That's kind of offensive by pretty much any standard. Really, you're encouraging people to step on and wipe their shoes on an image of the Buddha? Really? Of course, most Buddhists, we do find, placing a decapitated head of a Buddha statue in your garden or in your home is kind of an odd expression for a wish for inner peace. But that's just a Buddhist thing, No, I understand why people do it, and I'm not offended or anything, but I mean, you can understand why some people could take offense. So I'd suggest use of religious icons, for whatever reason, should be handled with some care and sensitivity. But this one actually is pretty funny, and it is a good interpretation of what the Buddha taught. So just to wrap things up, so human life arising from causes and conditions, it's impermanent, it's constantly changing, inevitably reaches an end. The Buddha's insight was that the human mind is wired to see the world in a dualistic way. There's me, not me, me and them, me and them. Is this reality good for me or not good for me? Of course, the natural instinct for self-preservation, it's necessary for the survival of the human species. We don't go deliberately walking in front of a bus. We try to protect ourselves, and this is important. And so the Buddha taught that we're naturally, the brain is wired to do it this way. We choose me first, and we delude ourselves into thinking the world revolves around me, that this unrepeatable life is about Kerry. But the very idea of me, my ego self, is demonstrably false because the self is constantly changing. Right? It's lacking in substance, it's empty, there's no permanent essence of Kerry. And it's limited by my human mind and my human body. So me, right, arising from causes and conditions, is subject to the truth of impermanence, the truth of non-self. And me doesn't like that, my ego doesn't like that. So I cling to this delusion of me, never getting old, never getting sick, never dying. And this is because I know that's not how it's going to work. It creates stress, discontent, unhappiness, because born human, right? Reality as it is. We all inevitably age, the body wears out, and we reach the end of life. So it is this disconnection, this gap between the reality my ego wants, the me wants, right, versus the reality as it is. Right? And it's this disconnection that creates suffering, existential angst, pain, so emotional pain, physical pain, psychological pain, spiritual pain. All of this can manifest because of this disconnection. And in modern terms, depression, anxiety, and addiction. So a Buddha is one who is awakened to reality as it is, who can see reality as it is, including themselves. As it becomes free from the bondage of the self-centered ego, it's extinguished the flames of self-centered cravings and desires and passions that blind us to reality as it is. So Buddhism is based on the insights and ideas of the historical Buddha, Gautama Siddhartha, who lived about 2,600 years ago, and subsequently the many paths and practices based on those teachings. So each of these quotes, right, the Buddha never said that quotes, it actually captures an idea or an insight, or it just kind of, rewriting the words of Buddhism in English, providing a direct, providing access to an aspect of the teaching. And so, I'm very grateful that these things actually exist. But I would suggest just be cautious if you're encountering Buddhism, in social media, because, I think as we've demonstrated, it's not exact. The Buddha never actually said those words. And if you're thinking of making doormat, don't put the Buddha's image on it, please. Thank you. So mahalo for listening this morning, and may your day be filled with aloha. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo.